the Star City. This is Scarlet Fever, a daily Nebraskan production.
So the last time that Ben was here, about 2 weeks ago, he said bad things were happening.
Yeah.
And since he said bad things are happening,
good things have happened.
Yeah, good things have happened because that was after the Wisconsin loss, and Nebraska basketball has gone on to win 4 straight games since then. So I think that Ben needs to continue to manifest terrible things because whatever his intuition is really wrong.
Okay.
Welcome to Scarlet Fever, everyone.
I had merit behind, especially when they went on the road to Wisconsin, got absolutely embarrassed. The outlook wasn't looking good, hosting a ranked Illinois team who they then beat. After that, I was like, okay, they got a home win. That happens all the time. Now they have to go on the road and beat Oregon, a ranked team. And they did somehow. I couldn't have seen this coming at all.
Ben has not been given anything for this over the last 2 weeks, but we're bringing the receipts back up because he said that disaster was imminent. But disaster seems to have completely flipped itself, and we are here to expose him for the fraud that he was 2 weeks ago.
It's a long season.
It is a long season. So welcome back to Scarlet Fever. We're glad to have you back. It is February 10th, coming off the Super Bowl. We will get to some Super Bowl a little bit later on, but
we have to get to the bigger game
first. There was a bigger game that happened yesterday between Nebraska and Ohio State, riding high from that West Coast road trip, which, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, really could have completely derailed the season.
Gone very badly.
It could have gone really, really badly. It at times looked a little concerning, but for the most part, they were able to take care of business when they needed to. Now Oregon is kind of in free fall mode, so that win might start to tank a little bit depending on how Oregon does.
For a bit.
But still looks pretty good on the resume. As of right now, Oregon seems pretty safe in the tournament. But that aside, it was a huge game at PBA yesterday with Nebraska and Ohio State. Grand scheme of things, not a huge momentum shifter, but for those two teams, especially when it comes to Big Ten tournament seeding. By the way, yeah, we are still talking about Big Ten tournament in Nebraska, by the way.
We can talk about that now.
We can talk that. That is allowed. That was a pretty big deal because neither team is really close to that red line right now.
No.
They
were before the West Coast road trip.
They were before that. There's a little bit of wiggle room now, but really that fight is to avoid playing on the first day. And for the most part, yesterday, Nebraska looked pretty good.
Yeah, there was a palpable buzz in Pinnacle Bank Arena. I will say, I would have liked to see some better things. There were times where they were just doing a lot of wrong things. They let Micah Parrish, who finished with, I think, 27 or 30 points.
He was in the 30s, I think.
They kept him open a lot even after he'd started hitting shots, and he just started to miss them, which I think they caught a break there, especially late. He really started to miss them. They did a lot of things well, though, obviously, when you come away with a win like that. 18 of 21 from the free throw line. Braxton Mia went 3 of 3, doubled his season free throw total, came into the game 3 of 13. Any team that shoots that well from the line is doing something well. Bryce Williams, one of the best free throw shooters in the country, also very good at getting to the line. Gets a lot of points there. They also out-rebounded Ohio State, I think, by 9 or 10. I know they out-rebounded them by 8 in the second half alone. Their rebounding has been very good, but big asterisk right there. Berg Buchton-Joe's ankle injury could hamper that rebounding ability moving forward.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch, and I'll be interested to see what Fred Hoiberg has to say going into the Maryland game on Thursday, the 13th, because that could really impact the post game as well, that front line that Nebraska has. And Burke, he'll be spotty when it comes to his points, but he is a huge presence when it comes to being able to get the ball off the glass, and whether that's get a second chance, put the ball up on his own, or even just to spread the possession out and get Nebraska back on offense.
He's probably the strongest rebounder on this team, at least from what I've seen. He's very good at getting up there and really securing the ball once he gets first contact with it. I doubt he plays Thursday just based off the way Fred Hoiberg talked about his ankle injury in post-game press conference. He said he got it pretty good, and that is very, very bad, especially when you're playing a Maryland team that is maybe the best front court in the conference. Derek Queen, last game, had 29-15 yesterday against Rutgers. Maryland beat Rutgers at home, which Nebraska couldn't do. Then you have an experienced guy like Julian Reese, who hasn't played very well against Nebraska, especially when he's coming to Lincoln. But when you have a guy with that much experience, he's always it's always someone you want to have.
It is going to be a big game nonetheless, and I think the importance of Buchtenschel has kind of evolved as the season has gone along, because I remember early in the season we were kind of, what's this guy going to be? He was kind of an anomaly. We had an idea of what he could be, but in a stage like this, we weren't really all that sure, and now we've just seen how valuable he's become with getting those rebounds when Braxton Mia has struggled. Andrew Morgan wasn't really himself for a good part of the season. Now that he's getting valuable minutes, he's proving valuable as well. But now you're losing one of those pieces, and you got to hope now that maybe with Braxton Mia finding some confidence in the Ohio State game that he can parlay that moving forward.
Yeah, he only played 7 minutes, though, which I still am a little skeptical moving forward. He did play pretty well in those 7 minutes, though. 3 from the free throw line again. Most surprising stat of the day. It took them until the second half for someone other than Braxton Mia to hit a free throw, which I thought was a very interesting stat from yesterday. But, yeah, obviously you need him to step up. Bryce Williams said post-game, it's just next man up mentality, and he name-dropped Braxton Mia specifically in that. He really is the X factor. For as much as critical as him as I've been, is not something I like moving forward, is him being the X factor. Berg Buchtenschel has just kind of been a constant for this team. He's just been consistently pretty good. He's obviously had some rough patches, but he's always good for that occasional bucket where you're like, that's a good play. You need a guy like that. And especially when he has a game like he did yesterday, Fred Hoiberg said that was probably his best game in a Husker uniform. When you have an injury late, especially when the game was kind of locked up at that point, that really hurts the soul of this team.
Because it was inside of 2 minutes as well. That's really a tough one to stomach. But while we don't want to hear the next man up mentality when you've been doing so well with who's been playing, that is the reality of the situation. And you got to hope if you're Nebraska, if that Braxton Mia is able to take on some of that role. And maybe all he needed was to spend some time on the bench and not play.
Yeah, you can tell that in those 7 minutes he played yesterday, he was a lot more motivated. There's still some boneheaded things out there. He's really weird spacing. Sometimes you'll find him just like under the basket. Sometimes you'll find him just like out of bounds on the baseline. Sometimes you find him just like right next to the ball screen. I think his spacing, he just gets kind of lost out there. I think his presence on the court is very odd at times. He's not as strong as a rebounder as someone at his size should be, and his defense has been kind of lackluster, especially when he came in to Nebraska as someone that was touted as like a defensive anchor.
A couple other things we should get to, though. Bryce Williams has really thrown the team on his back. Yeah. I think that's the elephant in the room, and we haven't talked about it at all yet so far today. But he's been the guy that Nebraska has gone to whenever they need a big shot, whenever they need something to stop the momentum of the other team. They're trying to build on their own lead, try to put a nail in the coffin in a stretch. That's been the guy. We knew he was the guy, but he's really been the guy here over the last couple of weeks. Like, he's been someone that other teams have had a really hard time stopping.
I think the thing I like the most about Bryce Williams is that his type of scoring is very consistent. He hasn't hit a ton of threes. At least he didn't yesterday. He only had 1 3 yesterday. He scores just hitting tough layups and getting to the line. Those things translate game to game. You're always going to have an off shooting night. That's just inevitable. But being able to finish like he does is something that is able to hold more consistency. And I do think we are cheapening how good Juwan Gary and how important Juwan Gary has been. Yesterday, Juwan Gary only played 9 minutes in that first half due to foul trouble. When he came in at the start of the second half, he basically went on an 8-0 run by himself. He scored 5 points, but then he got a big offensive rebound that led to a Berg Buchtenschel 3. And that really is kind of what swung the game in Nebraska's favor.
Those impact plays really can do it. And we touted Juwan Gary, especially last year, for all of the defensive efforts that he made. With all the different scorers that Nebraska was able to put out there, you think of like the C.J. Wilchers, the Rink Mass, Bryce Williams, and even for a little while Jamarcus Lawrence as well when he was out there. But now with all those players either not here or hurt, you've had to see some other characters come into the mix, and it's been nice to see the Juwan Gary, I don't want to say offensive renaissance, but more of a focus on that part of his game, because we've really gotten to see that blossom here this season.
It's nice to see him as a more consistent number two kind of guy behind Bryce Williams. I think even if he's not scoring, his presence on the court has been consistently positive. think his plus minus was way higher than everyone. I think it was like plus 19 yesterday. While the rest of the team was hovering around 8 or 9. The plus minus not the most reliable stat out there, but when it's that much of a significant difference, I think that's really shows his importance.
Another guy too that I think has not been talked about a lot is Sam Hoiberg, the walk-on product that is started for 5 or 6 straight games now, something like that. When we talked about it 2 weeks ago after the Wisconsin game, we were like, okay, this is interesting.
Kind of questioned his
it was right. It was interesting to see it, but now that we've seen it for a couple games, I'm interested to hear what you think about this now that we've seen it for a couple weeks.
I think, like what I just said about Jawan Gary, his presence is always positive. He's not scoring a ton. Obviously, it's not what the Sam Hoiberg experience is. Even when he's not making those big defensive plays, he's just making smart plays. He's a smart player. And what for his stature does leave a lot to be desired, but I think he makes up for that with his smart plays. Some plays I would like to see a guy like Riley Wooster make more.
Yeah, Riley Wooster has not looked great lately.
The thing that was most frustrating about him yesterday is every single time he was called for a foul, some of them might not have been fouls. The officiating was a little bit questionable yesterday. But every single time he got a foul, he would always keep his arms in the air to kind of protest the call.
I noticed that with Buchenschel too.
Yeah, I've noticed it the most was Raleigh. It was just getting to a point where it was incredibly annoying. It's just like you gotta handle those calls. You do have to learn how to adapt, especially when it's consistently the same thing. And some of them were fouls too. I think PBA had a little bit of questionable reffing. The crowd, they were almost complaining at every single foul call.
It did get a little extreme at times. I felt like that with the crowd noise, it was kind of like you're either on our side or you're not type deal. Like it's either give the calls for us or don't make the calls at all type deal. There was a lot of unnecessary.
Yeah, there was a lot of ticky-tack stuff.
Yes.
But I do think it was pretty consistent.
I would agree.
I never really care about how a ref is calling the game, like if they're letting them play or if they're calling ticky-tack things. I just care if they're consistent, and I think they were decently consistent yesterday.
Yes, but back to the Wooster thing. He's one of the team leaders. He's one of the glue guys.
He should be.
Do you think we haven't seen that lately?
I do think he is kind of filling his role as like a stat sheet stuffer. I think he had like 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 points. He had a big 3 late, which Ohio State's head coach Jake Diebler, I believe is his name, he said that was probably what sealed the game, was that Wooster 3. I do think his presence has been nice, but when you have a guy that started over 100 games at the college level, you need him to be doing more, especially when he's coming from a Power 5 school. He's not coming from a Group of 5 school. He has Power 5 experience. It just hasn't seemed like it's translated.
It really hasn't, and I guess you could kind of you could put it towards like acclimating to the new environment, but you can only use that excuse for so long, especially in basketball.
Especially when you've seen guys like Berg Buchtenjel and Andrew Morgan have really taken the Husker uniform and kind of made it their own. I think it's too late in the season to say you're still adapting. I think that's what non-conference play is for.
It should be what non-conference play is for. But now you look ahead, and you can't really say that the schedule is soft because it really isn't. You have Maryland coming up. You have a good Michigan team coming up.
It's a tough schedule. I think these next few games are all quad 1 opportunities.
Yes, they are. But the road games don't look too terrible.
That's the best part.
That's the best part of it.
You go to Penn State and
Northwestern as
well. Yeah, you go to Northwestern, Penn State. 2 teams that are kind of hovering around the same area as Nebraska and are very winnable games. I think they have a very favorable schedule just off how they get Maryland at home. They get Michigan at home. They get Minnesota at home. Minnesota's not one of the highlights of this next schedule, but they are a pretty good team. Dawson Garcia is probably one of the better players in the conference. I think it's really setting them up to lock up the tourney spot. I'd say the magic number's 20 wins. They're 4 away from that. So I think it's really the make or break part of the schedule right here.
And we'll obviously get into some bracket stuff later, but even now they're kind of teetering on that edge of in and out. Do they get the bye at the 11? Are they working their way towards a 10? I'm not really sure what to make of all that right now.
I would say they're out of the first four right now. The Ohio State and Nebraska were hovering around the same area of the bubble before yesterday's game. I think that win has really maybe put them for the next four in or even four after that, which I think is where you want to be, especially now when you have these chances to kind of grow your resume. I think people are getting a little bit too comfortable with Nebraska's spot. I think the last four games have obviously been massive, but I think they still have a lot to prove to really secure that tourney spot.
And I think that's going to start with Thursday's game with how they handle the adversity of what it sounds like from what you're believing is that
A big
Buchenschel
mismatch.
will not be playing.
It sounds like it will be a big mismatch. Again, that front court of Derek Queen, Julian Reese is very, very talented. Derek Queen's going to be an NBA player next year. Julian Reese has played a lot of games.
So let's look at this Maryland game coming up. What are some things that you're looking for coming up in this big Thursday night game?
I don't think they have to win the interior. I just think they have to really handle Queen and Reese on the offensive and defensive ends. They always had a disadvantage on the interior. I think losing Buchenschel makes an even bigger difference between the two teams. I just think they're going to have to really use the crowd in their favor. That's always what they've done at Pinnacle Bank, but I think they're really going to have to make big plays at the right times to win this one.
Do you feel like I know we've talked about this, and I know I've talked about this with Anthony when he's come and done this, but would you characterize this Maryland game as we need to not lose it, we have to win it, or is this we're kind of okay with either?
I think we need to not lose it embarrassingly. I think if they go out there and Maryland handles them at home, that's not good. That's a terrible look. But I think if you give Maryland a great game, I don't love moral victories, but I think playing...
There are no moral victories.
Yeah, there are no moral victories, but I think they can lose this game, especially with a lot of the good opportunities they have coming up. But I do think if you lose this game, that gives you a lot less wiggle room against Penn State and Northwestern. I think you got to win one of those two if you lose to Maryland.
I almost feel like you would have to lose both of them. I think there's a huge rut right now in like the 9 to the 14 spot, and a lot of that is because of conference realignment.
I think they need to break away from that. I don't like them being getting in that mix. I think they will get lost in that mix.
I think there's a huge glut of teams right now in that 9 to 14, 9 to 15 range, and obviously you just have to be in the top 15 to get in, but you're really trying to make that final push, that final stand. You've had chances throughout the season. That 6-game losing streak really knocked you down, and now they're trying to play catch up. So, I mean, I think at this point in the season, you're right. This is a game that they could afford to lose as long as they're not getting run out of their own building. If it's a close game, then so be it. But I think if they lose, it just adds the importance of those two games, which traditionally Penn State they've been mulling around 500, maybe a little bit better, and then Northwestern having a down year this year compared to what they've been the last 2-3 seasons. Those are, I think, even going into the Maryland game, those are still two huge games coming up.
Yeah, that 6-game losing streak just feels a lot more frustrating now that you've seen what this team's been, the level that they've been playing at lately, especially when you have those Rutgers and USC games. This team could be at 18 wins right now and be 2 or 3 wins away from locking up a tournament spot, especially when you lose those on your home court to teams that aren't the top of the Big Ten. That towards the end of the year, I think if Nebraska wins, makes the tournament and they're around 8 or 9 seed and get a tough opponent like they did last year in the first round, I think you're looking back at those games if they win those, they could have been a 6 seed and had a lot more favorable matchup.
Yeah, a lot of shoulda, coulda, woulda, but something went wrong in that stretch, and now they're trying to dig themselves out of it.
You just got to look forward, which they have a lot on their plate now, especially without Burke. One could argue he's their third best player, their third guy behind Gary and Williams. So losing a guy like that, especially looking at the huge impact they've had, it's going to be an uphill battle these next few games.
So we're going to transition quickly. We're going to start going into some Super Bowl, some very interesting Super Bowl things. And
Not a good game.
Not a good game, but there was no three-peat in that for whatever reason made some people happy.
As a Washington Commanders fan, I could not in good moral standing root for the Eagles.
Yeah, please. Coming up next. And welcome back. There, we have added a new character to the show.
Scarlet Fever debut.
Our lovely producer. His name is Gus. Usually hangs out behind the computer, but decided he wanted to show his pretty little face. Hi, Gus.
Hello. Good to be here. I've been waiting a long time for this.
Here to talk the Super Bowl with Gus.
Yeah. Hi, Gus.
Hello. I heard.
Ready for Super Bowl?
I'm guessing we all watched the Super Bowl.
Probably. So that was not a good game. Let's just call it what it is. It was very reminiscent of 1990 Super Bowls where it was blowouts literally every single season. We haven't really seen one of these in quite a while where it was just complete domination from one side. I guess you can.
The Bucs-Chiefs one was.
That's where I was going to go. Was that one?
Probably most reminiscent is the Seahawks Broncos with that snap over the head of Peyton Manning, where it was just. I mean, it wasn't even a competition.
That was a bad. We haven't had as many like blowout Super Bowls. We have had some bad games. Like that Rams-Patriots game was just bad.
It was just bad.
That was terrible.
But the storylines going into this game were really great. Like we had Chiefs three-peat and the Eagles avenged their loss from Super Bowl 57. There was Saquon Barkley doing Saquon Barkley things. There was just so much there that made the game so intriguing, and then it just kind of felt like a dud. Which is why I'm very interested to see what the television ratings are when they come out, I think tomorrow or Wednesday. But for the game to finish 40-22 does not tell the whole story. There was a lot of stat stuffing and scoreboard stuffing and scorebug stuffing, which is a whole nother thing.
I don't want to get into the scorebug.
Yeah, let's not go into that because
I hated that.
I just saw someone make it on Google Sheets and it looks like the exact same
think
thing.
It's bad, but I also think some people need to get some hobbies because like you can't be tweeting about that like you can't like still be mad about that. You got to move on.
I am still mad about it, but that's fine. I don't have any hobbies anyway. So it was 40-6 at one point.
I think my favorite part was the Mahomes to Xavier Worthy 50-yard touchdown was after the Gatorade bath had already happened.
Yeah. The NFL's official like Patrick Mahomes highlight video, the first play was when the score was 34-6.
I think it's funny that Xavier Worthy had like a 150-yard 2-touchdown performance and no one cares at all because most of it was after the game was already put away.
It's pretty remarkable just what Kansas City did like after the game was like already put away because they did score 16 points in that period.
Yeah, the Eagles probably let off, especially that front seven probably let off a little bit. I mean, they didn't blitz once.
Not the whole.
Josh
it was
Sweat,
a 4-man rush the whole way.
Montez Williams, they had Patrick Mahomes going through the ringer. I think what really came through is how good the Eagles signings were. I mean, Zach Bond had that cute interception. They turned him into like an all-pro linebacker. They turned it into an all-pro kind of like a pass coverage linebacker and like a tackle machine when he was a pass rusher most of the time. I think when you can like take a player and look at the tools and say we can put him in this spot, I think it really shows how good the Eagles front office is doing, and it pains me to say that as a Commanders fan.
Yeah, I think Howie Roseman is kind of destined for the Hall of Fame now that he's put together 3 different Super Bowl teams, maybe not Super Bowl winning teams, but he has won 2 of them now, built the team in 2018, got them to the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago. Now they win it this year. He's been with the Eagles for 25 years. You got to imagine he's on his merry way to Canton here pretty soon. But I remember after last year, there was a lot of people calling for Nick Sirianni's job.
Yeah, I think that was very funny. Like especially now they're talking about him getting extension. When last season a lot of Philly fans wanted him gone, and they wanted any other head coach.
Cue Ohio State and Ryan Day people coming up.
Yeah, I think it's funny that the two national champion or the 2 champion football coaches were on the hot seat last year.
For those of you listening.
Well, Sirianni's one of those coaches who's almost his reputation and job status really flows with the season every year because when you think of the Eagles, you're thinking Howie Roseman. Like Howie Roseman's almost he's not the head coach, but he's almost the leader of the team because the team is so much the roster. It's not a coach and a quarterback. It's not necessarily scheme. It's just how dominant, especially that front seven and that defense is. and that's been assembled by Howie Roseman. So I mean, I'm not even the way we talk about Sirianni is a lot different than we would a coach who's been to 2 Super Bowls, won one, been and won multiple conference championships. So he's just because it's kind of hard to tell what he does.
Yeah.
He's not a scheme guy. I mean, he's maybe a motivator, but he doesn't seem to rah.
He's got great coordinators. He's always had good coordinators.
My gosh, thanks. Vic Fangio finally getting a ring. About time for that guy.
I mean, it is kind of remarkable how he lost both coordinators to head coaching jobs after they went to the Super Bowl a few years back. And he's kind of rebuilt. Kellen Moore is now going to be a head coach. Vic Fangio could probably be a head coach again. Probably won't be.
I don't think he wants to be a head coach again after the Broncos experience. I think
and
I think that's why he came back to Philly in the first place was, for one, to be closer to his family because he is a Pennsylvania native. But two, I think he's content being a defensive coordinator.
I think there's a trend we're really starting to see with the NFL is failed head coaches just finding a new niche as just a coordinator for a team. And maybe the perfect structure is a head coach that's kind of like just like a leader of men kind of thing. Then you have your offensive coordinator and defense coordinator who are former head coaches who can just really focus on the game. I mean, that's what you have with the Lions. You had Dan Campbell, who just kind of leads the team, and you had Ben Johnson, the offensive mastermind, Anthony Lynn, defensive mastermind.
The problem with that setup, though, is your team's success is really dependent on those coordinators. So if you lose 1 or 2 to head coaching jobs, I mean, we could see the Lions take a step back here this year on offense with the loss of Ben Scott. Because if that head coach is not offensive, Ben Scott, bro.
Ben Scott, future NFL offensive coordinator.
Oh my God,
he's bringing Gunnar Katula with him.
But oh God, he's a culture guy. No, but I mean, you see the dynasties are coaches who usually are really strong on one side of the ball. Bill Belichick, probably the greatest defensive mind ever. Andy Reid, one of the top offensive minds ever. You can have that leader of men if you have really great coordinators, but it's hard to sustain over long periods of time.
I do think it's a good point. I think, not to talk about the Commanders' success, I do think they've kind of found a good spot with Dan Quinn, the defensive guy, and Cliff Kingsbury really having full control on that offense.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Cliff Kingsbury did not get some more looks for head coaching jobs.
I think you got to give him another year as a coordinator for another team, especially after he's a failed head coach, quote-unquote failed. I mean, we look at the quarterback's success he's had, and then you have kind of Kyler Murray as the outlier. I think there's some questions that need to be answered.
And I think also upper management in Arizona as well could be something to blame for that as well. But anyway, back to
the Super Bowl.
Back to the Super Bowl. We kind of got off on a tangent there.
We haven't talked about
with Nebraska offensive linemen.
We haven't talked about most people's highlight of the night, the halftime show.
That was a halftime show.
I want to pick Berg's brain on this one. What did you think of the halftime show?
What do you think?
That it was from all the halftime shows that I've actually kind of cared about and can remember. I think it was one of the more aesthetically pleasing ones. That's not when it comes to music. That's not really my jam. But I was more kind of just paying attention to what was the scene? What were the stage setups? What were the dancers doing? Who else? I think Samuel L. Jackson there was pretty cool. I thought that was a great touch. But I think really what caught my attention was they tried to make Bourbon Street in the middle of the field, and then they had all the lights out in the stands, and they were making words and symbols on there, and I thought that was pretty creative. So I thought from the the visuals, I thought they did a really, really good job with it. And from the start, it kind of looked like they were trying to go with some kind of Squid Game type deal.
I think it was supposed to be PlayStation.
Yeah, I was a little shocked when I saw that. I'm like, am I looking at a PlayStation controller here? Because
I think that's what it was supposed to be. A lot of very very artistic choices, stylistic choices with the halftime show. The only problem I have was that the set list was very much picked from his latest album, which I think when you look at it now, Kendrick Lamar usually when he releases an album, there's a lot of hype, and this one's kind of released on a random Friday, which makes me think that was really just released to kind of have songs for his set list, which I think he played some good songs. I really do think he did the right thing with Not Like Us and just kind of teasing it throughout and then having it be the finale.
Him looking into the camera saying Drake's name is pretty awesome. Having Serena Williams there dancing.
That was
Drake's ex.
Insane. I I do. When you have the whole Superdome yelling A minor,
That
I think
they
your
turned
career,
up the crowd mics.
Your
for that,
career's
too.
over.
Yeah. Oh, that's yeah.
I think it's probably one of the better halftime shows.
I was almost thinking he was about to say pedophile. Like I thought they might have gone that way, but
Parents, cover your kids' ears.
yeah.
I don't think there's many children listening to this podcast. But I do think it was better than the halftime show Kendrick Lamar was a part of with the Bengals Rams one. I think the old heads listening to this will probably disagree with me, but I think Kendrick Lamar solo performance is better than the one with Dr. Dre, Eminem, and him.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also agree too, even
Yeah.
though I am one of those old heads.
I really liked it. It was part of it was the music. I mean, the music was fine. I liked the songs. I'm familiar with them, but I thought the visuals were really great. All the dancers. It wasn't too much, but with what they did, I thought they executed it really well. And also, I think Kendrick, it's really underrated maybe how good his performance was. I mean, a lot of times we don't see rappers for that long actually rapping their songs. It's a lot of backing vocals. I thought he just did a great job as a pure performer.
I think he was really aware of the performance. I think he the way he moved around. I think it was very well choreographed. Like what Danny was saying. I think you a lot even Super Bowl halftime shows. You just kind of have this standing and dancing kind of thing, or standing and singing.
Mm-hmm.
I think he really moved around the whole
He
set
was
well.
Everywhere on that
Yeah.
field.
Which imagine how much practice went into that. That had to have been insane.
Pretty good halftime show, gotta admit.
Better than the game.
That was
At that point, that was the only thing I was really caring about because there wasn't any good commercials. Commercials have gone very downhill lately. It's really just a who's who of celebrities now. Matthew McConaughey's in 4 Super Bowl commercials.
I hate the hate the genre of commercial where it's just throw as many recognizable faces in as you can.
we are in that era of Super Bowl commercials.
The one with Drewski, the Dunkin' Donuts.
It's
with Ben Affleck.
They aren't cohesive at all. They're
No.
kind of it's made to be. It's like jingling keys. They're made. They want you to point at the TV.
Exactly.
I did love Jeremy Strong in the coffee.
That was funny.
That was perfect.
That was funny. I do think that was one of the funnier commercials. But they're just
I like the Mountain Dew seals.
People hated that one.
I loved it.
I think it was kind of funny. There were some odd ones though. What was the Creamer commercial with the dancing tongues? That was weird.
Catch that one.
there were definitely some goofy ones.
People are Super Bowl commercials now. They're made to be talked about. They don't care about the actual content. They just want people to be talking about it.
Because that's what sells.
Which I think is what has made them terrible. I don't want to go buy any of these products. I'm just going to talk about how stupid their marketing teams are now.
I hated the cringe Tom Brady Snoop Dogg. The hate commercial. We don't need to get into the messaging, but they're so serious. I'm are we really doing this?
Especially for a commercial of that kind of that subject matter. That's not the kind of commercial where you should just be stuffing celebrities into it.
Yeah.
I think that's a very odd choice. And they played it twice,
and
too.
for two people who've made their careers on having animosity towards their opposition.
Is that the first time someone who was commentating the game was in multiple commercials while the game was going on?
Can we talk a little?
I don't think so. I think in the past, Tony Romo's been in them. Greg Olson was in a couple 2 years ago.
The dynamic of Tom Brady calling that Super Bowl
He's just not good. He's just not good at calling a Super Bowl or calling a game, really. He was messing up players' names all the time. You could tell, he'd mumble stuff a lot. He kind of needs to keep some stuff to himself. I think sometimes it doesn't feel like he knows he's on air.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an art you have to get used to. Especially, he was really poor. I saw the Dave Portnoy tweet. He was really poor getting in and out of his breaks. One thing I think he struggles with is getting his point finished before the play-by-play guy needs to start. He's often talking almost to the snap of the next play.
I think we also need to remember that this was a very unusual situation. When Greg Olson did it 2 years ago, he was already working with Kevin Burkhardt before Joe Buck and Troy Aikman left. So that was their first year as the number 1 team, but they were the number 2 for a very long time together, working under Buck and Aikman. This was so different because Tom Brady, we have to remember, Tom Brady's a rookie. He's called, 20 games leading up to this, and not very often do you see a first-timer get the number 1 spot. This was a very unusual type of deal that he signed, and I think some people are thinking like this is only going to last a couple of years, then he's going to go off and do his thing with the Raiders.
But he can do both now, apparently.
Apparently, he can do both.
I like the diversity of having like a player in there, and I'm glad he was included.
Yeah, well, typically you do have that with your NFL, like your broadcast teams, but I think we do need to remember that this was only his first year. It was
Then he shouldn't be doing the Super Bowl.
the circumstances were weird. It was baked into his contract that he was going to be the number one guy. I get it, but he probably shouldn't have been doing the Super Bowl. I'm with you, but that's just kind of how it works when you're the number one guy. Those are the types of assignments that you were doing, and it was strange because I'm with you. He did have his moments, but 2 weeks ago he turned in one of his best performances of the season in the NFC Championship game, and then goes out in the Super Bowl and just kind of goes along with whatever Kevin Burkhardt's saying.
Yeah, I think it's funny how much of a blowout the game was, that all the discourse around it was just other like halftime show commercials, commentating.
And Tom Brady's Super Bowl.
Yeah. Disappointing Super Bowl. Hopefully it's better next year when the Washington Commanders are your Super Bowl champions.
But we do have to remember this. Tom Brady will not be involved in the next 3 Super Bowls. That means if Patrick Mahomes makes a Super Bowl, he's probably got a good chance at winning it because he's 0-2 whenever Tom Brady's involved in a Super Bowl.
Did not know that.
Yeah. 3-0 when he's not.
Why won't he be involved in the next 3?
Well, we have NBC's doing the game next year.
Okay.
ABC the year after that.
They should be on
CBS
Tubi
the
every year
after
like it was this year. They should only do it on Tubi.
that. Let's just put the game on
Super
Tubi.
Bowl presented by Tubi, Fubo, and
Freebie.
So we hope you enjoyed the
Meth streams.
Super Bowl bar talk.
Yeah, we need to stream East Super Bowl. And you have to have all the pop-up ads. You can't get around that.
It probably was on
That's how they
Streamies.
have all the ads. It's just pop-ups.
yeah.
The game itself was a dud, but every so often you'll get those. There is no three-peat, so the fans in Kansas City cannot go out and scream Super Bowl anymore. But I don't think the Chiefs dynasty is dead yet.
City of Philadelphia might be dead after that celebration, though.
I've never seen an entity that destroys itself like Philadelphia when something goes good.
Yeah.
They like win a championship and they're like, let's burn it down.
I think it's crazy how so many fans were sacrificed their vehicle for the celebration. They're like, yeah, we'll just flip my car, man.
Yeah.
Are they going to do that when the Phillies finally win a World Series again?
Well, that's not going to happen, so.
Okay. Yeah, because Dodgers are going to win, the next 8?
It's all about the Mets, baby.
Oh, jeez.
My favorite tweets were like Patrick Mahomes is sacrificing like 3 goats right now in the locker room
Chiefs
at
devil
halftime.
magic.
Yeah.
It's a fun conversation. It's great to have Gus on for the
Yeah.
first time.
Real spicing things up.
If you want more Gus, we need to know.
Let us know. Let us know in
Let
the
us know in
comments.
the comments below.
Well, thank you, Gus, for making a specialty appearance. We hope to see more of you around, and thank you for producing half of the show behind the computer.
He's here
and
every time. He's just usually behind the camera.
He's usually behind the
I
camera.
usually just like to watch from the corner.
Yeah, he enjoys watching the show, and Jackson Engelstead is our post-production guy, taking care of everything after the fact. Ben, thank you for stopping by.
Thank you for having me on, as always.
It's been a pleasure. We will be back next week, hopefully with some more good news in the basketball front, and maybe a little spring sports coming up.
Maybe
as
some more
well.
Gus, too.
Maybe some more Gus. We will see
Special
what
treat.
happens. Lots of special treats. Thank you for watching and listening to Scarlet Fever wherever you choose to watch or listen. We will see you next time.